Hey fellow gliders, welcome back. This is Robert Petito, and today we're talking about users. Chances are users are signing into your app. They might be creating a profile, or they might be doing some sort of functionality that is user specific. And so setting up your user profiles in your app is critical. So in this video, we're going to talk about your users table, setting up user profiles, creating an onboarding experience for our users, and making sure our data for our users is kept secure. Setting up our user profiles is something that we want to consider and set up correctly the moment we begin to develop our app, since the majority of our app development will hinge on the fact that we have a user profile table. All right, let's jump in. So here I am ready to begin a new app. I'll just choose continue, and then I have to select a source. Now, if you are starting from scratch and you know that you're going to be leveraging Glide tables, you can select Glide tables, create an app, and it will create the user profile table for you. However, if you're selecting an existing source, that's Google Sheets, Airtable, or Excel, you can select that option, and it's possible you already have a database of users in that sheet. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to hit continue here, and I'm going to select a table that I just created here. I think it's called users. Select. And it's going to create an app for me with that database as the source for my app. And you'll see from the get-go, if I go to the data section of my app here, you see that Glide created for me a users table, and this little blue icon lets me know that Glide designated this table as the user profile table, which is a special kind of table in Glide, which we'll take a look at in just a second. However, it's possible that I don't need this users table. It's possible that my Google Sheet already contains a list of users. And these are the users that I want to be the users in my app. All right, so if that's the case, then we can actually trash this Glide created users table and then specify that we want this Google Sheet to be our users table instead. If your Google Sheet doesn't contain a list of users, then you can leverage this Glide user table as your users table if you so choose. Otherwise, you can go into your Google Sheet and create a users table that's set up just like so, where you have your name and email and so forth. All right, so let's pretend that my Google Sheet has this list of users and I no longer want to leverage the Glide created users table for me. I can go ahead and trash the users table. And now I need to specify in Glide that this spreadsheet contains user data. These are the users that are going to be signing in to the app. Okay, to do that, we go to our layout. From inside of our navigation, select user profile. And then on the right, we're going to select our sheet as the source. We have to select the data that matches. So for name, we can choose the first name or the last name, email, photo, and other role. Now, one thing to note, as of October 2023, if you select a user's role, then that means that those users will be considered private users. So if you're looking at Glide's pricing page and noticing that you have a private user and a public user threshold, that's what that's referring to, that private users have a role and will count as a private user as part of your threshold. Now, there's a variety of ways to use roles in Glide, but basically means that it's some sort of group-based security permissioning. If you want more information about roles and row owners and how it relates to the data security of your app, please check out my video, linked in the description below. I'll also post it right over here for your convenience. Now, our spreadsheet does have a role column, so I'm going to go ahead and select the role column for our user here. One thing to know is that if your spreadsheet contains a first name and a last name column, just know that you can only select one of those to be the name field within inside of your user profile. So if you wanted to have some sort of combined full name, you'll want to create that in the Google spreadsheet. For our purposes today, I'm going to leave the name as the first name and be done with it. Okay, so what did we do? So we ended up deleting the Glide created users table, and then we designated our Google Sheet as the new users table for our app. And you see evidence of that because the indicator icon is hovering over this table in our data editor. The next thing we want to consider is data security. Who is signing into our app? How can they sign in? And what should users be able to see? The majority of these configurations can be found within the settings portion of your app. So I'm going to go ahead and click on settings. And there's a couple of different places we need to visit. The first one is under privacy. So I select privacy. And here's what type of app we are creating. Are we creating a private app, which is whitelisted app, which means only the users that we specify can sign into the app. That means that you have to pre-populate your users table in order for them to sign into the app, or specify the email domain that's allowed to sign in to the app. So if we want a private app, we'll select private, and then we have to decide what users will be able to sign in to the app. Is it anybody who's in the users table? That means that I'll need to pre-populate this table with all of the users that should be able to sign into the app. Possibly it's just team members. So maybe you don't want to open this app at all unless they are a team member of your Glide team folder. And again, that setting is back over here in the members section of your team folder. Another option is the allowed email domain. So if you are part of a company and you want only the members of your company to be able to sign in, you can specify the email domain. So if my company works at company.com, I can choose company.com without the @ sign. And that means anybody at company.com with an email address can sign into the app, which means I won't need to pre-populate this users table with their email addresses. As long as they have an email.com or company.com, they'll be able to sign in and create a new record in my users sheet. The last method is all emails in table. And what this means is that you can set up a separate whitelist of the users that can sign into your app that's apart from your dedicated users table. So if I were to have a second sheet, so maybe back in my spreadsheet here, let's rename this to be users. And then I can add a new sheet and we can call this whitelist. And maybe I want only a subset of these users to actually be able to sign into the app. When is this useful? This is useful when you want to retain user data, but limit who can sign into the app. Maybe Emily Davis no longer works for my company, but she's used the app quite a bit and has a lot of data in the app that we want to preserve for the other users who are viewing the app for some reason. Okay, that means that we can copy all of these email addresses, let's say, and we can paste them in, but we can remove Emily from our list, and that means Emily wouldn't be able to sign into the app anymore, even though she has an email address in the users table. Okay, if you want something more automated, one thing you can do is if you're using Google Sheets, you can set up a whitelist column. And this can simply be like a checkbox column. So I can do insert checkbox. And maybe everybody who's checked should have access to the app. And if you're not checked, then you don't have access to the app. And then what this could be is just a filter formula in Google Sheets. So to do that, simply type equals filter. And then we need to specify the range. In this case, the range that we want are the email addresses, like so. And then we need to set up our condition. Now, if we're doing checkboxes, that's really easy because it's going to be a true or a false. So we just select our checkbox column. In this case, it's range F2 to F of our users table, and then hit enter. And then these are the emails that are marked true. Right? So if you see that if I mark Robert Wilson now becomes part of that list. But if I uncheck Robert Wilson, he is no longer part of that list. And thus means that Robert Wilson would not be able to sign into my app. Again, this filter formula works really nicely if you're using Google Table or an Excel or Airtable or something like that. If you are using Glide tables, then you'll have to create this table manually. So back in our app, under our settings, privacy, we could specify that the emails in our table in the whitelist should then have access to our app. Okay, the very last option here is single sign-on. This is available if you are an enterprise client, which basically means you can configure single sign-on with whatever single sign-on provider you happen to be using, Okta, Clever, Azure, Google, so forth, right? Okay, apart from the privacy section, then you also want to determine how your users will be signing into the app. That section here is in the Users and Authentication menu. So for here, you can specify that users can sign in using the PIN email. They can be signing in with Google. If you allow Google sign in, then you can also disable PIN email if you only want them signing in with Google. You see a single sign-on here as well. If you have the privacy set up where users in the users table can sign in, then in the Users and Authentication, this access requests becomes available, and this will allow users to request access even if they don't already belong in the users table. And then lastly, user email addresses. Now, the email address in Glide is critical to determining who is a user in your app. So if your user doesn't have an email address in the email column of your user profile table, then Glide doesn't know who they are. Everything in Glide related to user profiles hinges on the fact that a user has an email address and they're signing in with their email address. Glide does not yet have SMS login or something like that, right? The email address is what determines a unique user in your app. So there's a couple of nuances that we have to talk about. The first thing is that if John Doe is signing into our app with john.doe@email.com, that's how Glide knows them. So if there was another John Doe at email.com, right? Then Glide will see that John Doe maybe is in there twice, right? But Glide will only recognize the first John Doe in your Glide table, which means that this record will never be used. Okay, so you want to make sure that your users here are unique. Okay, this also means that the email addresses are case sensitive. So if I pre-populate my list of users with capital letters like this, maybe that's how my company spells them out, right? Then if John Doe signs in with lowercase letters, it's going to recognize him as this record and not this record. So one best practice with Glide is to make sure that your email addresses are always lowercase. All right, so we've talked about how to set up a user profile table. We've talked about how to set up our settings to make sure our users can actually sign into the app. The next thing we need to talk about is user security. The easiest way to secure your data is through row owners, and row owners are typically always applied to either an email address or a role type column. So here we have our list of email addresses. If I only want users to be able to see their own record, then what we can do is we can make the email address column of any table a row owner column. To do that, you simply select the arrow on the field of your column, scroll down to make row owner, and then you'll see that the column header now has this blue user icon, which signifies that that column is protected by row owners. You see here that all the other columns have been grayed out. Right now I'm signed in as John, so John is the only row I have access to because that's where my email address lives. It's as though all of the other rows don't exist. And again, I go more into depth in row owners and roles in the video that I described earlier, so make sure you check out that video so you know exactly how row owners works for your app. Now, the last thing that I want to explain is how to allow your users to complete their profile after signing in to the app. So let's say we have a photo column and maybe a phone number column. I'm going to add a column to the right here and say phone number, and the type will be a basic phone number column. And I want to allow them to fill out this information because I don't have it as part of my records. So we want to create an onboarding experience for our users. Now, one thing to note is that once the users sign into the app, as long as their email address is already listed inside of the user profile table, then Glide will automatically know which record belongs to that signed in user. So if I sign in as Michael Brown, Glide will know that this is my user profile row, as long as I'm using that exact same email address. And again, it is case sensitive. So what I typically do in order to create an onboarding experience is I dedicate a screen in the layout section of my app that allows the user to focus in on their record and fill out those pieces of information. There's a variety of ways you can do that. The first way is through some sort of generic welcome screen. Now, typically I create my welcome screens based off of the users table, but if you wanted to create a custom table with just some welcome-like information, that's fine too. To do that, you'll just create a new table. It could be within inside of your Google Sheet or a Glide table. It's really up to you. I can call it welcome. And maybe I have some pieces of information like welcome to my app and so forth. Okay. I can then build a new tab off of this table. So I'm going to add a new tab, screen from data, welcome. Okay. And it knows that I have some information in here. I don't really want a collection of anything. So maybe what I'll do is I'll add in some text, and this text can point to my name column and make it kind of big. Right. Typically what I'll do is I'll also add an image on here to kind of welcome the users, make it a little bit more friendly. One great website for this is Storyset. So Storyset gives you a lot of just like kind of these fun, generic, like storytelling type images. And you can search for a variety of things. If I search for profile here, I see that I have some options for users to create a profile. Maybe I want this one here. And what's cool is that you can change the color to match the color of your app. So if my app is pink, I can choose this pink color instead. And then I can download the PNG. Okay. It does ask you to attribute this information. So typically what I'll do is I'll put this href inside of the alt text for that image. All right, so back on my app, I can add in an image component. And then the image can be uploaded. I'm going to select it from the one I just selected. And then inside of the alt text for Glide, I'll put in that ref. All right, so now I got something a little bit prettier. And then maybe I want to allow users to update their profile. Again, there's a variety of ways we can do this. The simplest way is by pointing them to edit their user profile. So I can add a button here. And this button can say, set up my profile. And I can direct them to the edit screen of their profile. So we're going to navigate. We're going to show an edit screen. And the edit screen won't be this item, which happens to be our welcome table row, but rather we want the user profile row. And that's why it's super important to always set up your user profile table first. That way you gain access to this user profile row when you go to configure the different components and columns within inside of your Glide app. All right, so now that I've selected to show the edit screen of my user profile row, when I click on the button, right, then we see that we can add in a photo. We don't want them to edit their role nor their email. One thing to consider is that if you allow your users to edit their email, if they submit, they're actually going to be logged out of the app because, again, Glide recognizes the signed in user as their email address. So if they're signed in right now as john.doe@email.com and then change their email address, then Glide can't reconcile that. And it's going to force them to sign out of the app. They would have to sign in with the new email address, and then Glide will pick up where they left off. But you might want to make that clear in some sort of text underneath here if you're planning on allowing your users to change their email address. 99 times out of 100, I don't allow users to edit their email. For photo, I typically use an image picker. And then we want the phone number. So I want to do a phone entry component and allow them to edit their phone number. All right, so now they can fill out the pieces of information that I haven't already included in their user profile table. So then after they submit their user profile, maybe we want to hide this welcome screen. That means that this welcome screen needs to have some sort of visibility condition set on it when a user has completed their profile. So how do we know when a user profile is complete? Well, that's completely up to you. You have to determine what fields are required for a user profile to, quote, be completed. So for me, I want users to have a photo and a phone number in order to complete their profile. So typically what I'll do is I'll include another column in my users table in order to capture the date on which they've completed their profile. And typically I call this onboarding completed on or profile completed on, something like that. So that way I get that little bit of data about when they've completed their profile. And I usually make it a date column, so that way I can use that information for other purposes. I'm never really going to display this in the app. It's just nice to know when a user maybe has actually signed in and completed their profile. All right, so we're going to determine that if a user actually completed their profile, we're going to record the time and date that they've completed their profile. And if they have a time and date recorded, then that must mean that they've completed their profile. All right, so if they have a time and date recorded, then we no longer want to show this welcome screen, which means on this welcome screen, under the options section, we can set that as a visibility condition. So we're only going to show this welcome tab when the user profile completed on is empty. And it would be empty if they haven't yet recorded a date and time. Once they've recorded a date and time, then it would no longer be visible. That means that as part of setting up their profile, we have to record the date and time on which they've set up their profile. So here's the little trick that I often employ in order to make that happen. On the edit screen, we can make everything required. So I'll make the first name, last name, image, and phone entry required. That means that they can't submit this form unless they've completed all those pieces of information. Then what we can do as part of this form experience is to add a special value. So these cool 4 special values allow us to send data on the backside when someone's completed a form. And one of those special values is the current date and time. And so the current date and time can be written to the profile completed on. All right. Now, the current date and time will never be recorded if I don't submit the form. So if I hit cancel here, I'm still back to the welcome screen, right? But the moment I fill out this pieces of information and my phone number, okay, now I'm able to submit the form. And when I submit the form, the current date and time will be written to that column, which then triggers the visibility condition for that tab, and the welcome tab should go away. So I hit submit, and there we go. This tells us that the visibility condition is false. The user of the app will never see this message. This is just for us, the builder, to let us know that if that user was actually viewing this in the app, that they wouldn't be able to see the screen. But we, the builder, can actually preview or hide the screen so that we can continue building the screen if we so choose. But for the user in the published app, they would just be visited whatever the other tab is. All right. So if you're going to employ this where you're having this visibility condition set so that you want to funnel them into an onboarding experience, that means every other tab needs to have the opposite visibility condition. You only want to show all of the other tabs when the user profile completed on is not empty. So if we navigate to a different user, let's say Jane, right? Jane's users tab is hidden because she has not completed her profile. She only sees the welcome screen. She sets up her profile, It's pointing to Jane because, again, we're editing the users, the signed in users edit screen. She can complete her photo and her phone number. And then when she submits, again, this screen will be hidden. And then she'll be into the users tab or the whatever tab you have available to your end users. So hopefully now you have a bigger picture as to the benefit of setting up your user profile table, when to choose user profile within Glide versus in your spreadsheet of choice, how to set up privacy, how to set up your user profile settings, and how to create an onboarding experience for the end users of your app. If you like this video and you want to see more content, make sure you like and subscribe. If you have any questions at all, feel free to leave me a comment below. You can also reach out to me at Twitter @rpetito. And as always, thanks for watching.